The GPS DairyCAST features the high-value insights of the GPS Dairy Consulting team's trusted advisors and the owners and managers from the elite dairy farms they serve. These conversations deliver on the GPS Dairy Consulting promise to inspire change and grow leaders.
This episode of the GPS DairyCAST is proudly sponsored by Elanco Animal Health. Elanco provides customized solutions for dairy producers to yield healthy young stock and productive cows, to control flies and pests, and to advance sustainability and improve management efficiency. Hello and welcome to the GPS DairyCAST. I'm Peggy Coffeen from the Up-Level Dairy Podcast, serving as your host. And on this episode from the 2026 GPS Leaders Forum, GPS consultant Andre Pereira is joined by Dr. Sara Kvidera from Elanco to talk about the impacts and opportunities for dairy sustainability when it comes to cows, communities, environment, and profitability. For more than 50 years, producers have trusted Rumensin to deliver consistent, dependable results that add more profit potential to the bottom line. The findings from more than 400 Elanco research studies have made it possible for producers to include Rumensin in ever-changing feed programs and management systems. Attention to detail sets Rumensin apart. So ask your GPS consultant and feed supplier for the Rumensin brand or visit elanco.com today to learn more. The label contains complete use information, including cautions and warnings. Always read, understand, and follow the label and use directions. Consumption by unapproved species or feeding undiluted may be toxic or fatal. Do not feed to veal calves.
Sara, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you being a speaker at our Leaders Forum and all the insights you gave to our producers here today. Can you just kick this off by telling us a little bit about yourself? What's your background in agriculture?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Sara Kvidera. I grew up on a row crop and beef farm in eastern Iowa. So we have about 1,000 acres of row crops, corn and soybeans, and then about 100 head of mama cows that we calve out every year. So I grew up absolutely in love with agriculture. My family is still into it today. I went to Kansas State on a track scholarship and took a class there called Physiology of Lactation and fell in love with the dairy cow because they're like the athletes of the farm animal world to me. And I joined a research lab there with Barry Bradford and got really involved and loved the physiology of cows. From there, I did my PhD at Iowa State with Lance Baumgard, looking at energetics of the immune system and how that can be an energy drain on the cow. So just a big background in physiology and energy flow. Yeah.
Great. So those are very interesting topics. I feel like physiology of lactation was one of my favorites too when I was in school as well. So you just gave us a talk about sustainability in the dairy industry, and could you just summarize a little bit what you went through today, what you talked about today, so we can get an understanding of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So sustainability is this big buzzword, and it feels like you either love it or you hate it, right? And there's lots of different words around it: sustainability, resiliency. It all kind of boils down to three things. It's the industry and society and the environment all working together to keep going, whatever it is, the business or the practice. Those three things need to work in harmony in order to keep a business going. So it's three pillars to sustainability, and there's more and more focus on the environmental pillar recently, but it does go back and forth between society, industry, and environment pretty frequently. In particular, the dairy will make up a big footprint for a food company. So if you go to the store and you buy a gallon of milk, about 70% of the emissions that went into making that gallon of milk came before that milk even left the farm. And it kind of falls into one of four buckets: either feed, enteric emissions, manure emissions, or energy. Feed, enteric, and manure making about a third each of the emissions on farm. So dairy companies are starting to have to report their emissions more. Food companies are having to report their emissions more, and so they're becoming more interested in their supply chain and managing emissions in that regard.
Is that why it's been such a topic lately? Because we just hear this word, right? Sustainability, you have to be sustainable. For us in ag, we hear it about a lot, but it just goes away in our mind because we think, oh, that's far, we don't know what we're doing. But it's just coming more and more up into conversation. It's being more and more important. Why is that specifically? Who's pushing more for that?
Yeah. So it feels like this kind of fringe topic that affects us, but we're not really sure what to do about it or how it really affects us today. It's becoming more and more important because these dairy foods companies and foods companies in general have made commitments to lower emissions by 2030 or 2050. Those are kind of the two big targets. And initially they made these goals, and now they have to figure out how to achieve these goals. And so it's becoming more and more real that we're in the how do I achieve this goal phase, and they're trying to figure out these projects that they can do with farms to reduce their emissions so they can report these reductions. So that's how it's becoming more and more real today.
What kind of companies are those that are pushing for that?
Yeah, so these are big Fortune 500 companies. Think about the Nestle's or Mars or Hershey's of the world, where powder from milk from your farm might end up in a Hershey's chocolate bar or a Nestle chocolate bar or something like that.
Yeah, so pretty powerful companies, right? So that's why we hear more and more. They're pushing for it, and we have to comply or we're going to be out of compliance, right? And so on the farm world, back to the farm level, back to thinking on where we actually work hard here, is there a profit in sustainability? How can the cows help us with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the good news here is that a lot of power resides with the farm, right? These companies are relying on the farms to implement change, and they recognize that change comes with a cost, and they have a budget that they are willing to spend on helping farms implement changes that promote sustainable practices.
So there is money on that.
There is money, yeah. There is a budget for things, and there's a lot of different examples of projects out there where CPGs, consumer packaged good companies, are working with farms to implement changes and paying for it.
Okay, and more specifically on a farm level, what can we be doing right now to create that idea of sustainability and be sustainable for these companies?
Yeah, so I guess if I'm a dairy today, I would start thinking about those 4 buckets: the enteric methane, the manure emissions, and my feed footprint. Those are the 3 big ones. What am I doing today to look at those? Do I know what that footprint is? And what data do I have around that? And how is that valuable to my supply chain? And how can I use that data or that information that my supply chain might be wanting to create more value or another revenue stream on my farm? So just kind of knowing where you're at is the first step. Talking with your advisors and understanding what the opportunities are in your area is another good step to take.
Would you give it as an example of what you could do with feed, for example, to decrease your footprint and be more compliant with these companies?
Yeah, an example that I'm working with on a day-to-day basis is Bovaer and Rumensin. These are both additives that go into the dairy cow's diet that reduce methane emissions, and we can quantify that. And then that data, that quantification is worth something to these consumer packaged goods companies. And so we do have several projects up and going. In 2024, we got over $10 million back to producers for implementing Bovaer or Rumensin on farm. We have Bovaer, which is a methane reducing feed additive in over 150,000 cows in the US today, and they're generating revenue from feeding that. And so these consumer packaged goods companies are investing in these reductions so that they can quantify them in their carbon accounting.
Very, very interesting on those, mostly because we already use Rumensin in a lot of our feeds here in the United States and in diets. So we're already doing it without even knowing there's some economic benefit to that and sustainable benefit to that, right?
Yes, yeah.
That's very interesting. Sarah, thank you for the insights on Bovaer. That's a very interesting product there. Can you tell us a little bit more? Is there any detriment for the cow by eating that, or is there any improvement possible, scientifically speaking, that will help the cows with that product?
Yeah, so first of all, Bovaer is labeled for enteric methane reduction. That is the label claim that's on the label. In order to be marketed in the US, we had to go through a very thorough review of safety and efficacy. And so we're very confident the data, there's a big data package on Bovaer that there's no negative impact to productivity. And we have it in over 150,000 cows in the US. It's going really well. I think the next really exciting and important question is, where does that carbon and hydrogen go?
That's a good one. It's got to go somewhere, right? Yeah.
So methane emissions is a 6% gross energy loss. Go back to your gross energy, to digestible energy, to metabolizable energy flow.
And just so we're on the same page, most of methane is enteric, right? It's from the rumen,
Yes.
not from the backside of the cow,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Correct. Exactly. That's a good clarification. You know, the general public thinks cow farts, but that's not true. It's a burping, it's eructation. So the exciting thing about methane reduction is that we're affecting the energy flow diagram. So you think about gross energy down to where you might feed 110 megacals of gross energy, but really you get 45 megacals of net energy because you lose it in feces and urine and gas and heat. So methane can be about 6 megacals of metabolizable energy loss. So it's a big energy loss. If we inhibit 30% of that methane loss, that's about 2 megacals of energy that's up for grabs. Now we've got to figure out how to feed cows with a methane inhibitor to be able to capture that. And I think of that as kind of the next frontier of energy capture. Think of all the things we've done with nutrition, with improving digestibility and capturing that energy back. We've made huge strides there. You work with forage quality all day, every day, right? And recapturing carbon and hydrogen there. Can we start to do that with methane inhibitors is kind of the next fun, exciting question.
It's actually very interesting to hear that because the first limiting nutrient that I have in my diet every day when I'm working on diets and try to get milk out of the cows is energy.
Really?
For example, this time of the year, we're here in the cold weather in December. Naturally, the cows produce less milk in volume, but they increase their solids in fat and energy in protein, right? And that's where the energy is going. The energy has to go somewhere, and that's usually the most limiting factor we have in our diet. And so it's very interesting to hear that there's 5% of energy that is going to waste on methane, and we can actually try to capture 2 to 3% of that. That is revenue on the farm level that we can try to capture.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting area.
Make your feed center a profit center. Feed Fit is an innovative, module-based, and collaborative initiative from GPS Dairy Consulting, which provides the framework and resources to understand the financials, trace the inventories, and track the KPIs of your feed center. By implementing the expertise of your GPS consultant, modules are strategically executed with the goal of continual improvement in the efficiency of your feed center. Take the science of nutrition to the reality of milk in the tank with Feed Fit. To learn more, ask your GPS Dairy consultant or look under the Education tab at gpsdairy.com.
I'm curious, how do you measure energy on your farms? Energy can go a lot of different places, right? It could go to milk, it could go to body condition, it could go to reduced intake, but better productivity. How do you work with your farms to understand energy efficiency?
Yeah, great question. Energy has to go somewhere, always. And we get it from a good quality fiber, we get it from byproducts that we use on a day-to-day, cornmeal, soybean meal, etc. We can't measure it on farm. It's impossible to measure it on farm, but it's doable to estimate it using our nutritional models and some ideas of what milk is doing, what production is doing, how many days in milk the cow is. All of that affects the amount of energy they need on a day-to-day basis. What I try to do is make sure that I have the correct amount of energy fed to the cow, but also I have to balance that with animal health as well. We can push a ton of energy on a cow inside the rumen.
Yep.
If you push it really hard, she's going to produce less methane, actually, but she's going to get sick.
Yeah.
The rumination is not going to happen. The most important part of the cow is the rumen.
Yeah.
It's trying to make that rumen as efficient as possible to make sure the cow is not even healthy, but also produces as much milk as she can. So we try to work on this energy by just analyzing where is the energy going on the cow right now, where are we spending energy in the cow. For example, at minus 20 weather we're going to have here in the next 2 days, she's going to make a lot of heat. She has to stay alive. She's going to use that. And we're going to suffer because of that. We're going to suffer on volume and solids on milk, right? So that's why I'm very curious to hear more about this energy part, because I think that's a new frontier is how do we manage energy, which again is the most limiting factor for us on the farm, how to manage that to make more milk and get better results out of cows.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's huge opportunities. And I'm glad you brought up rumen health, if I could dig into that
Yes,
for just
please.
a second.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things when we go down this road of like methane inhibitors, methane does serve a purpose. It gets rid of hydrogen in the rumen so fermentation can continue. So there is a point to a cow making methane and burping it. And we don't want to disrupt anything that's naturally happening to a cow. So we're very, very careful when we design these additives and implement them that we're not screwing up the rumen, essentially. We don't want to cause a constipation of hydrogen in the rumen. We want that hydrogen and that carbon to go somewhere useful. And so 30% reduction in methane isn't going to really screw up the rumen too much. We have a lot of digestibility studies where we've made sure that we're not impacting fiber digestibility. So that's a really important thing that we wanted to dig into before we went bigger with this. Mm-hmm. So we always want to pay attention to rumen health. Super important. Yeah.
Yeah, on that topic as well. So I started to think a little bit about animal production as well. Is there a specific type of breed or production level that's more sustainable or less or can give you better results? There's a lot of conversation nowadays on, do I have Holstein cows? Do I have crossbreeds? Do I keep my jerseys? Is that what's best out there? Should I make 100 pounds of milk? Should I stick with 75 pounds of milk? What do you think is the best level or the best way to go through that?
That's a great question. I would say what processors and food companies are looking at today is greenhouse gas emissions per kilo of energy corrected milk. That's their metric. They look at cost of milk first when they're sourcing it, and then they look at the footprint of the milk second, and that's emissions per kilos of corrected milk. So however you get there, right, is what the food companies are looking at. I think you're bringing up a really interesting concept, and especially thinking about feed efficiency. We think about the milk side of the equation a lot, making more and more milk, but can we do it with less resources? Less intake, less on the crop side as well. So I don't know, how do you look at feed efficiency on farms? I'll push that question back on you. How do your farms measure success? Is it pounds shipped, or is it efficiency, or some kind of money corrected?
No, it's a very good point. The way I measure it, to be honest, is I want as much quality and calories in a bite of food from a cow as I can get into them, versus just, I can push a lot of cheap byproducts, but if they're not giving me the results and they're not cost efficient and the return on investment is not there, but they're just fillers and they're cheap, I don't think that's sustainable, and we're just wasting time and resources to get to a point, right? Yep. It's just, in my mind, what I think is, if a cow makes 400 grams of methane per day, or if she makes 450 grams of methane per day, but she's making 80 pounds with 400 grams, or if she's making 100 pounds of energy corrected milk with 450 grams, just like you said, the slight increase in methane is useful, or it's very good because she's actually making more product per gram of methane, right?
Yeah, the intensity piece of it is very important. We have absolute emissions, how much is she emitting, but also how much is she emitting per unit of what she's making. And I think initially companies were looking at this absolute metric, but it's becoming more and more evident that they're paying attention to the productivity benefits as well. Yeah.
Have you measured, or have you looked into, are cows on pasture, not being produced very intensively, are those more sustainable than cows that are intensive in a free stall and working really hard for that milk? Is there a difference between cows on pasture eating more grass versus cows inside in sustainability?
Yeah, oh my gosh, this is a loaded question, Andre, but I love it.
I like the loaded question.
Yeah. Let's just back up to like fermentation 101. When you ferment grass, you're making acetate and butyrate, and those release more methane per unit of intake than if you're feeding something that has a lot of energy density in it, like a high corn silage, dry corn type diet. That will make less methane per kilo of feed being eaten. So there's that aspect of it, but you have to balance that with like pasture availability, and is that land being used or not? There's that part of it too that throws in a little bit of the complicated wrench. But I would say, like, in general, conventional systems are really, really sustainable and do a really good job with resource efficiency, and that helps that amount of methane per kilo of intake pretty significantly.
Interesting. So there's way more into it than just looking at a pretty cow on pasture and thinking that's sustainable. Is that pasture useful or not? Or how she can convert something that's not useful for humans into something that's useful for humans. Do you have any more specific examples of those cases that a cow can actually be a recycler and help us be more sustainable then?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. So byproducts are huge, right? We have dairy cows, and in the battle of breakfast beverages, you can pick between orange juice or almond beverage or milk, right? And what the general consumer doesn't realize is that oranges create pulp. Like, I had a bag of oranges on my counter the other day. There's 6 of them in there, and I juiced them all, and I got like this much juice, right? And I had all of this pulp and rind left over. Well, we take that kind of thing and we feed it to a dairy cow, and they make milk and cheese and ice cream, which is a superpower in my opinion. And one of the really cool things about dairy cows is that they can take amino acids and proteins that we can't really use and turn them into a really highly bioavailable protein for humans. So they can actually upcycle things from grass into protein, which is really cool. Superpower, and something the general consumers don't know much about. We recently hosted a group of registered dietitians and told them this story, and they had no idea. So the general human population loves protein right now, right? Like, it's the hot thing. That's probably a story we need to tell more, is that we can take grass and through the magic of microbes, create a really high quality protein that humans can use.
I wonder how many people know out there that the whey protein they buy from online or from the grocery store is actually coming from dairy cows. And from them transforming something you could never think would be eaten, like grass, into a very high quality protein that can help even with health, which is a high protein diets today are very related to a high health diet, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the exciting part about sustainability. It's not just greenhouse gases. I know that's popular and it comes in and out of popularity, but the whole upcycling thing is a story I think that we have yet to tell. And that's a really exciting opportunity.
What do you think farmers could be doing, farmers themselves could be doing to bring that knowledge up to the general consumer so they can understand that farmers are not trying to poison them and give them anything bad? On the contrary, farmers are working actually to give high quality food for the general consumer in the best way they can.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've done some consumer testing on some of these messages before, and what consumers have told us is that the farmer has the most trusted voice in the industry. Wow. They don't want to hear from me. They don't want to hear from you. They want to hear from the farmer, him or herself, because they are the ones boots on the ground doing the hard work every day. They have a really good reputation in the consumer's mind. So the more that our farmers can tell this story and use the data that they have on their farm to tell a story about sustainability, the more value they're adding to their product that they're shipping and selling to the end consumer.
How interesting. So the next time you think you have, as a farmer, you think you have an opportunity to host a breakfast on a farm or an open house, that should be a high priority for you as a farmer, right?
It's huge, yeah. Especially nowadays where the agrarian population is shrinking, right, and the urban population is growing. There's a bigger and bigger divide, so it's more and more important that we find ways to tell the story, yeah.
Sara, thank you so much for this very interesting and very good discussion on sustainability. It helps us understand what the word means and where the pressure is coming from, and how we, not only us consultants, but also the farmers that we work for, can act better to improve the relationship with consumers, the relationship with these big companies that are working hard to be more sustainable as well. So we really appreciate your time being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for everything that you do for farms and for the dairy industry. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Sara.
Thanks.
You just heard from Dr. Sara Kvidera from Elanco and Andre Pereira from the GPS Dairy Consulting team here on the GPS DairyCAST. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen from the Up-Level Dairy Podcast, and thanks for joining us for this episode. We look forward to you tuning in for our next episode of the GPS DairyCAST.
The GPS DairyCAST features conversations that deliver on the GPS Dairy Consulting promise to inspire change and grow leaders. If this GPS DairyCAST has you looking for more ways to become an elite dairy producer, find more information in our show notes on how you can add a GPS advisor to your team.
This episode of the GPS DairyCAST is proudly sponsored by Elanco Animal Health. Elanco provides customized solutions for dairy producers to yield healthy young stock and productive cows, to control flies and pests, and to advance sustainability and improve management efficiency.